Okay, Unit 4. How have the values and principles embodied in the Constitution shaped American institutions and practices? Question number 1. In the Constitution, why are the powers of and limits on Congress addressed first and in greater detail than those of other branches? In addition to the powers granted to Congress in Article 1, what other provisions in the Constitution address legislative powers? Why? How have the enforcement provisions of amendments adopted since the Civil War increased congressional power? You may begin.
In John Locke's second treatise on government, he argued, "Freedom of men under government is a standing rule to live by, common to everyone of that society, and made by the legislative power vested in it." The founders, influenced by John Locke's social contract philosophy, thought that the legislative power of government was its most important role.
During salutary neglect, the colonial legislatures successfully experimented with self-government, encouraging them to apply it on a national scale. The first attempt, under the Articles of Confederation, resulted in a weak and ineffective Congress. The need for a stronger national legislature was clear. However, they were hesitant to grant it a majority of the authority, so they addressed the powers and limitations of Congress first, and in greatest detail when drafting the Constitution.
Article 1, Section 8 specifies what Congress has the ability to do. However, unlike the British Parliament, Congress's powers are limited in Article 1, Section 9 to curb abuses by the legislature and prevent arbitrary changes. This section includes broad restriction on things like bills of attainder, ex post facto laws, and habeas corpus. The founders also wanted to avoid the British Parliament's universal and aristocratic representation. Thus, they created a bicameral legislation made up of House of Representatives and Senate to represent both the people and the states.
In addition to the power granted to Congress in Article 1, several other articles address legislative power. Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2 states that the Senate has final approval over all executive and judicial appointments. Ronald Reagan's appointment of Robert Bork was the last time Congress rejected a Supreme Court nomination. Article 2, Section 4 allows Congress to impeach any member of the federal government, like the 2011 case of Thomas Porteous, a Louisiana federal judge.
Article 1, Section 8, Clause 9, and Article 3, Section 1 give Congress the power to ordain and establish courts, which they've used to control the number of Supreme Court justices and create the federal court system. Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2 gives Congress the power to produce rules and regulations for territories and admit new states. For example, Puerto Rico's territorial constitution had to be approved by Congress in 1952, and they are subject to the United States federal law. In the November election, Puerto Rico held a referendum for its political status and voted to pursue statehood, something Congress now has to approve.
Congress also has the ability in Article 5 to propose amendments to the Constitution. Since the Civil War, they have adopted many amendments with provisions that have expanded their power. The 13th, 14th, 15th, 23rd, 24th, and 26th Amendments all have a clause that allows Congress to pass legislation to enforce its provisions. Many important pieces of legislation are based off these clauses. The Civil Rights Act of 1866 and 1871 prohibit all racial discrimination and give the government tools to enforce the 13th and 14th Amendments. In fact, the Civil Rights Act of 1871 was formerly titled An Act to Enforce the Provisions of the 14th Amendment. In accordance with the 14th and 15th Amendment, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 outlawed the use of literacy tests and the restrictions put in place preventing individuals from registering to vote. The Supreme Court took on this enforcement provision in the 1996 case Katzenbach v. Morgan, in which the Voting Rights Act was upheld as constitutionally protected enforcement.
The Pregnancy Discrimination Act of 1978, which prevents business owners from firing employees because they're pregnant, is justified under the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is currently suing 4 separate companies on behalf of pregnant women who are discriminated against. These enforcement provisions are not without limits. In the 1997 case, City of Bourne v. Flores, the Supreme Court ruled that Congress could not use its enforcement powers to pass laws that interfered with enumerated constitutional rights, striking down the Freedom Restoration Act.
The founders wanted Congress to be the most important and effective branch of government, but modern Americans are hardly satisfied. A 2012 Rasmussen poll revealed 8% of the country had a positive opinion of Congress. To compare, 5% have a positive opinion of Fidel Castro. That's within the margin of error. Thank you.
So 8% of the country approves of Congress. Is this evidence that Congress in itself needs to be reworked? Do we need a new system for the legislative branch?
It's not that Congress in itself is the problem, it's that the political system we have today with two diametrically opposed parties is what's really causing all this gridlock. We have two parties that don't want to compromise in a civilization based around hyperpartisanship. Solving that problem is the real issue, not the structure of Congress itself.
James Madison stated in Federalist 62, laws and regulations must be passed with a concurrence of both a majority of the states and a majority of the people. And Congress today has not been able to get a concurrence of both, therefore nothing has been done. So they need to work on agreeing instead of reworking Congress itself.
You address gridlock, and one of the reasons cited by any party that's ever been in control of the Senate is that the filibuster rules effectively enable the minority party to, they don't even have to, it used to be that you had to like actually stand up in front of Congress and read the phone book for 3 hours or however long to keep the bill from going to a vote. Now, effectively, the senators can phone it in. Harry Reid wants to change that so that he believes the Democrats and the majority would be able to get things done. Do you agree with changing those filibuster rules to make it easier to get things done, or is that gridlock necessary to protect the rights of a minority?
I agree with changing the filibuster rule, because now they don't even have to actually filibuster. They can just threaten the idea of filibustering, and they get what they wanted accomplished without actually standing up there for 3 hours and reading the phone book. So yes, I think the filibuster rule should be changed.
From 1860 to 1900, the filibuster was used a total of 16 times. In 2009 and 2010 alone, it was used more than 130 times. Clearly, there has been a dramatic increase in this use, and it's simply destroying any kind of progress that either party can make. It's not just a Democratic or Republican issue, it's an issue of actually getting legislation passed through the Senate.
As you said in your question, a majority of the time they're not actually filibustering, they're just threatening to filibuster. So if they were actually filibustering, like the 26-hour filibuster against the Civil Rights Act, and they were showing their disgust in the bill and their disapproval of it, then it would be a successful tool for the minority. But when they're just threatening and nothing is happening, it's not a successful tool and it needs to be changed.
Many states have moved to term limits on their legislative branches. Do you believe the Constitution should be amended to allow for term limits on members of the House and Senate? Why or why not?
No, I do not believe that there should be term limits in the Constitution. In the Supreme Court case, term limits in the Thornton, they ruled that states do not have the ability to determine term limits. So
I also think that with term limits on congressmen, the people directly vote for the congressman. They don't directly vote for the president because it's through an electoral college. So if they aren't happy with their congressman that represents them, they should not vote for them and they should vote for someone new. So if they are happy with that person, that person should keep going and doing what they think is best for that state.
Although there's the other argument that term limits essentially stop this creation that we've had over the last 100 years of our history of career politicians. Right now we have people that go to Washington, stay there, and then just live their entire lives and careers running the country. Instituting term limits could effectively change that so we get more people actually controlling the affairs of their country than just a few select class of politicians.
In almost every amendment ratified since the 13th, Congress has been given enforcement power. Has this been a good idea? Why or why not?
I think it's been an excellent idea, and there's a couple pieces of legislation I think really highlight this. The Voting Rights Act is probably the prime example of a piece of legislation that was needed in American society. We had major opposition from the states, Jim Crow laws and things threatening the rights of many people. It took national action through this bill to get anything changed.
It also lets Congress deal with events that happen more during that time, and they can use their past amendments to deal with those problems of that time instead of having to create a whole new amendment, which takes a long process.
Do you think the framers would be in favor of how the executive branch has expanded in today's world, or would they prefer to go back to their original vision of having a very strong legislative branch?
The framers explicitly put in the Constitution in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11, that the president should not be able to declare war, and that's in Congress's hands. But with the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, Lyndon B. Johnson was able to escalate the conflicts in the Vietnam War. And then it's been used in every other war to escalate our war, and without actually declaring a war. So the framers would see this as the president infringing on Congress's power, and the president becoming this aristocratic dictatorship that rather than a democratic body.
I agree with my colleague on that view. They wanted the legislature branch to be the most powerful. They give the president powers like making treaties or appointments, but they cannot be. The Senate has to approve them, therefore giving legislature branch the greatest power.
Good job.
Sarah, I think you need a bit more eye contact during your testimonial and to slow down a little. You seem very nervous, and so like just calm yourself down a little there. But on a whole, I thought you guys did a really good job. Jack, I was really impressed with your balance of like how you came across and your sense of humor of sorts, but still like really on topic with what was going on.
I concur with all that. I think, you answered the question, all of our questions directly, so your depth of knowledge is obviously, I will never question it for the entire group. I think, I agree that you guys do need to slow down your responses in order to allow the judges time to absorb and to think about what exactly it is that you just said. And I don't mean that you need to go to a snail's pace or anything like that, but just I think the key is ultimately just when you come up here is just to relax. All right, you guys are you guys are going to be the last the last unit up, so you guys get I think the great responsibility of just giving it just letting it all out, because effectively at this point you're throwing your Hail Mary shot and that's it. And all 5 of the units that are going before you are excellent, and you match them or exceed them in some areas. So in terms of your content, Chase, you're always very encyclopedic with your knowledge of the history of the United States Senate, which is very impressive.
Thank you, Senator.
And I think it's very. One thing I want you guys to, with the term limits question, one thing to think about is the advantage, of course, is this idea that you get quote unquote citizen legislators, people that are close to the people. But you also get legislators who don't understand the rules of Congress and they don't understand how Congress works. And a lot of the times when there's congressional gridlock, it's when there's a turnover from one party to the other. In 1994 when the Republicans took over, in 2006 when the Democrats took over, in 2010 when the Republicans took over again. And you have these short life cycles where people don't understand the history, they're not able to build long-term relationships with each other, and that's a lot of the times how things get done in Washington, is the old guard who have been there forever know how to push things through and know how to compromise with the other side. So that's just one thing to think about, but good job, guys.
All right, as they stated, you guys did amazing. The content was really great. I noted that I thought it was great that you guys used a 2012 reference. One thing that I did write down is that you guys know your content. Make sure that you're confident in your answers. Some of it you guys kind of shied away a little bit and almost became a little informal. Like it was just kind of a conversation with your friends. So make sure that you're confident in your answers and you stick through it from beginning to end. Another thing that I put is be careful with the ums, and then also looking at your papers while your team members are doing their references. Almost all of you were looking at your paper the entire time, which is fine because you want to make sure that you're following to see where to pick up. But when you don't look up at all, it was kind of a little bit distracting as a judge. I also had, actually that was it. So great job.
Yeah, I thought you guys did a good job. I'll echo the other judges that said the testimony seemed a little fast and a little bit of nerves, but that, it's completely understandable. It's the first time you guys are in the nice dress in front of an audience. So you'll be very surprised at how just this experience tonight will set you up for, a great performance coming Saturday. So remember, you guys are the experts, and take that confidence into the room on Saturday. I thought the content that came out in the cross-ex was good. Just as I said to the other group, there's always room for more content. That was good. I think overall, you guys just have to understand that, every group that sets foot on that stage is going to be nervous. The majority of the judges that are judging you guys are going to be nervous. They're speaking in front of an audience too. So, understand that. That puts everybody on a level playing field, and then just knock it out once you guys get up there. But you guys will do a great job. So, good job.